All right. Welcome to the Lead Generation World Podcast. We're doing it live again this week. Thank you for joining me. We got a great conversation today. We've got Tim Ash with us. He is the author of The Primal Brain. Also, you probably know him best for his book, Landing Page Optimization. And Tim is the he also founded Site Tuners, speaks all over the world. Really happy to have him. So we're going to get started with Tim in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to mention we do have Lead Generation World coming up March 21st to 23rd, which Tim is the keynote speaker of. Prices actually go up this Wednesday, so February 10th. So make sure you register before that, save a couple $100, and hopefully we'll see you there. We've got a really great show planned for Orlando. We've got all the safety precautions in place, masks, social distancing, temperature checks, all that sort of stuff to ensure that responsible adults can get together in a safe manner and hear great sessions like the one that Tim is going to be presenting on. And then also just kind of getting back together and networking. So hopefully we'll see you there. Before I bring on Tim too, I also want to mention if you're watching live on YouTube, go ahead and comment and say hello just so we know you're here. We'll see it. And if you have any questions, this is a conversation. And I want you guys to be included in it as well. So as things come up, as we start talking about different topics, feel free to put a question in the comments and we'll see it and we'll address it and go from there. So let me bring on Tim. Tim, welcome to the show. How's it going, my friend?
Hey, Mike. Really happy to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to hop on this live, because usually these podcasts are all recorded and, all that good stuff. And you can kind of edit things out if if there's a mistake or a dog starts barking in the back or whatever it may be, but we're going to do it live.
Yeah, the mess is the message.
Exactly. So you're here in San Diego as well. So it's kind of nice to have two San Diegans with no hair live on a podcast.
Good looking bald man club. That's what I call it.
So I wanted to actually, talk a little bit because every time a speaker comes on or a guest comes on the podcast, I generally go through their LinkedIn a little bit and just kind of get their pathway through their career. And obviously, I think we know the story that you immigrated here from the Soviet Union when you were young, and then. I think moved to San Diego for school, which is sort of similar to my story. I moved to San Diego and actually went to Point Loma Nazarene, just down the street from where you are, and then stayed here ever since. I mean, who the heck is going to leave San Diego, right? But what I found interesting, and I'm kind of curious about the bridge, but one of your first jobs out of school was a computer scientist with SAIC, which is a big company here in San Diego as well. How did you go from that to landing page like Site Tuners?
Wow. Okay. Great question. So I came out here originally to go to UC San Diego, and I got in on an early admission UC Regent scholarship. So, look, it's 3,000 miles away from home, top research university. It's top 25 in the world right now. And it was only started in the 1960s. So rocket ride of a reputation. And I double majored in computer engineering and cognitive science and stayed at UC San Diego for grad school for 7 years, and what would now be called deep learning, machine learning, AI, artificial intelligence, neural networks, that sort of thing. And then 7 years in, having worked at some defense contractors, I started my first digital marketing agency. We helped launch new .coms at the dawn of the internet era. Yeah. So I guess you could say I've had the software and the wetware, both things, and they're perfect preparation for internet marketing.
How did that come about, though? You were doing contracts with, what specifically were you doing with the data science? Were you building?
Well, so think of it this way. Artificial intelligence is basically computer systems that learn from seeing lots of examples and data. Okay, so back when I was doing it in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of data. So we were working on the algorithms, how to make self-learning systems. And then eventually when the internet came along, there were these huge data sets. And that's when artificial intelligence really took off, because you had the algorithms and the huge data sets to train them on. And that's what accounts for its success. So I was working on the algorithms of how to make computers that learn from examples, essentially.
So how do you go from that to digital advertising, though? That where's that leap? How is that? Did you come across a a friend that was doing something and you're like, hey, I can do that too? Like, how did that happen?
Well, I kind of felt that, I'd worked for some big companies, like you mentioned SAIC, a big defense contractor.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that was a soul killing kind of environment to be in. And so I didn't want to do that. So I had this fit of entrepreneurial insanity. And I said, look, I can see that this internet thing isn't a fluke and it's really going to take off. And this is like the printing press or another big discontinuity in the history of the world. So I wanted to jump on it. So I started essentially a .com incubator, starting new internet startups or helping them grow. So I took down 2,000 square feet of office space, got a phone connection and an internet connection, bought a desk and a computer. And I called up my girlfriend and I'm like, hey, guess where I am? I'm in my new office and I'm running around naked because I can. And it was just that fit of entrepreneurial insanity that took me.
Did you always have that? Is that something that you always thought about, like when being your own boss kind of thing?
Well, I think it's being an immigrant. My parents came here so my brother and I could have a better life. We came over when I was only 8 years old and my brother was 5. So it's really important for them that, I guess that we succeeded and we thrived and everything they did was for us. And so I was thinking, look, my fallback position is a 6-figure job, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I just go for it? And that was the thinking. Like, if you, this is a tip for entrepreneurs, if you actually visualize the worst case scenario and you get comfortable with it, then a lot of the fear just goes away. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going on the rocket ride. Let's do it.
Yeah. Do you think that entrepreneurship, that spirit, is innate, or do you think it's something that can be sort of learned?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of your cultural environment and your personality. I think if you've lived a mostly risk-averse life, in the words of Pink Floyd, have become comfortably numb, then it's hard to later in life say, okay, now I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And it gets harder also if you get married, if you have a couple of kids like I did, then you're carrying the weight of the family as well. And you don't have the freedom of maneuver. So I think it's largely a built-in personality thing, and it helps to have the support for risk-taking in your immediate circle.
So you start this company. Did you had a couple clients already on the hook, or
No, I mean, I literally quit my job at SAIC and did that.
Oh my God! So you get on the phone and you start making calls, and your sales pitch is, "Hey, I'm a digital marketing agency.
This internet thing is not a fluke. You need to at least put up your postcard on the internet."
Yeah. And how did you win that first client? I mean,
I don't even remember the first one, but we had a lot of big clients along the way. I mean, looking back on it 25 years later, we work with Nestle, with Google, with Facebook, with Expedia. We can document, from my former agency, 1.2 billion in value that we created and directly tied to our work. It was just a lot of hustle. There's no such thing as an overnight success. Behind anyone that really succeeds, you need to have the learning experiences, which are essentially repeated failure, if you look at it that way.
Yeah. So were you guys building? Was it just building websites, or were you doing
building websites, driving traffic? We were one of the first companies that actually, before Google AdWords, there was. Let me go back there. There was a .com incubator called Idea Lab, and that became GoTo.com, and that became Overture, and that eventually got bought, became Yahoo Search. Well, we were back there creating software for managing large-scale pay-per-click campaigns. And it's like, how do you manage your bidding? Now we think of marketing automation as, I think, something everybody does, but we created the first tool that was licensed by Yahoo Search to actually go into the guts of their system and change bids in real time for pay-per-click. Bid jamming, like making sure your competitors paid as much as you can, make them bleed and pay for that sort of thing. And so I actually got into building database-driven websites, running pay-per-click campaigns, and then we saw the affiliate space take off, and obviously big overlap with lead gen. And so we said, well, why are we doing this for other people when we could do it for ourselves?
Yeah.
We were driving traffic, but they weren't making good use of it. So we kind of started doing pay-per-click arbitrage, spending our own money, and became a super affiliate and drove traffic to different properties. And then that kind of evolved. We saw that we were landing really high quality traffic on shit websites. And so we said, the bigger problem is your website stinks. Let us fix your website, and then we'll all make a lot more money. And that's how I got into the conversion rate optimization. And that's really what the next 20 years was about.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you always somebody that, thought about writing, because that is, sitting down and writing a book or even blog posts or all these sorts of things is difficult for some, that's quite a challenge. And sometimes, who wants to sit there and do that? But is that something that you always, obviously you're a highly educated man, you did a ton of research and did a lot of work through school. Did you ever think about, I was going to write a book one day?
I didn't explicitly. I think I look at writing as this larger sphere of creativity. So communicating passionately is what I'm about. And so whether that's keynote speaking or making art or salsa dancing or writing a 450-page book, on landing page optimization, this is the second edition. It's all the same. Actually, the writing was hard for me because it requires discipline. And I'm not like one of those floss your teeth twice a day guys. So I'm not good at discipline things like that. And the other thing that made it hard is it's a solo activity. Once in a while, actually this past week, again, someone said, hey, I went into this field because I read your book. And that's great, but that's feedback I get 10 years later. There's not this immediate collaborative thing. Like if you're on stage and you're speaking or presenting, you're getting feedback in real time. So the hard thing about writing a book is it's also a solo activity, which cuts against the grain for me.
I think that would be my problem is I'm sure there's a structure to writing a book, right? And your outlines, you have deadlines on certain chapters and all that sorts of stuff. But is that sort of how you manage it?
Well, the first two editions, so the landing page optimization book, which is now in two editions, 6 translations, 50,000 copies sold. It's kind of like, I'd say without bragging, the Bible in conversion rate optimization. That one was done for a big publisher, division of Wiley Press, John Wiley and Sons. They've been around 200 years. And it was brutal because it was all under deadline. And I kept slipping deadlines and pulling all-nighters for weeks at a time with 2 small kids and running an agency. So that was not a lot of fun. This last book that I wrote, which we'll talk about later, called Unleash Your Primal Brain, that one I self-published. So I had a very different writing process. And actually, what helped get that one done was the pandemic. All of a sudden, all my international keynotes went away, and I had time to finish the book.
Yeah, I was wondering, how long it took you to write that book, your most recent one here. Did you just
all of them took all 3, the first, second edition of landing page optimization and Unleash Your Primal Brain took a couple of years. So it's a big investment. There's a lot of people that say, well, I just want the book for credibility. It's the best, business card I can give out. And so they don't care about the quality. Whereas for me, my own quality standards, it's got to be a great book. And so I'm writing every word of it, and it's got to be up to my standards. So that's a 2-year process for me.
Yeah. We'll get in that book here in a second, but the landing page optimization, that was like a beginner course really for me when I started, came across it. I was like, oh, this is awesome. When you get into digital marketing, one of the first things you start getting into is optimization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find a resource to learn all those tips and tricks and all those sorts of things was your book. And I know that's probably the case for a large portion of people in the industry. They go straight to that book,
Yeah, I'm really gratified about that. Over the years, the one mistake I made, well, it's inevitable. It's not really a mistake, was some of the content got a little dated in terms of screenshots. So younger kids are like, hey, Grandpa, where'd you get those examples? That's from the 1800s or something as far as they're concerned. So, but other than that, I think a lot of the general principles in there are really sound and good grounding, and they're evergreen in a sense. So I hope it continues to help people understand how to make better web experiences.
On that note, do you think anything has changed more recently, like even in the last year or two? And I don't know if it's related to the pandemic, but we can throw that in there too. With activity online and optimization expectations of consumers on landing pages, have things changed at all, or is it the same? Is it the same thing?
Well, there's kind of three levels of that I want to attack.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Okay.
first is there's always technology changes, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, moving to more voice. I don't look for search results. I say, Alexa, find me the closest pizza joint. Okay, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So the voice is definitely coming on mobile. I mean, for a long time, you have to focus, and we resisted doing anything beyond websites at my agency. So it's like, do you do mobile? Nope, we don't. But eventually, mobile traffic became more dominant, and we started doing mobile. Do you do apps? Nope, we don't. So there's still things we wouldn't do as an agency because focus is really important. But I think that there's technologies that come online, and you have to look ahead and make sure you're going to be addressing these transformational tectonic kind of shifts. And then there's also a kind of slower agreement among other people about certain conventions, I guess you say. Like when you're on a mobile website and you see those three horizontal lines, most people now recognize that as a hamburger menu, right? That's where you click to get the mobile menu on a website. Well, that wasn't like a super strong convention. It still isn't in a lot of places. Yeah. So you have to kind of time what these common conventions are and whether to make use of them as in terms of web design. But then to me, what's more interesting is the fundamental layer, which never changes, which is you're trying to influence the human mind. And that's where we got most of the durable value at our agency. So if you understand what brains are, how they evolved, then you can persuade people across a wide range of technologies. And it doesn't really matter how you're applying it. It's what you're applying it to, the brain.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because that screen view is changed right now. Most people, I think, I haven't looked at my Google Analytics in a long time, but the percentage of people using a device versus a desktop computer is probably changed a lot, right? So
absolutely. And in that format, for example, you could say on the one hand, it's much more complicated to design for a small screen, and it is. The constraints are just real estate, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's advantages to it. For example, we're all used to watching videos. We binge watch Netflix shows on our phones and YouTube videos. So for example, the use of short form video for mobile, you get 30-40% people watching a video, whereas on a desktop, you might get 2 to 5% watching a video on a website. So you see very different usage patterns, and some media are kind of optimized for different kinds of responses.
Yeah.
So the biggest mistake I see across, say, mobile and desktop is to have the same site that is just stretchy, or I call it responsive light. But nothing changes really, other than you're staggering things into a single column as opposed to multiple columns. And so that's really stupid. You should really have completely different experiences for each medium.
Well, yeah, because tying in lead gen, obviously you're trying to get people to fill out a form. People aren't going to fill out a form on their phone, right? That's
right. Like, apply for this bank mortgage on your phone. Like, said no one ever, right?
Yeah.
Like, drive them to the phone call, right? Have a different response mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let them download something or watch a video and then grab an email and then get back to them when they're in another environment.
Right, and that you can't do with just a responsive page.
I call it responsive light. It's really what you need are adaptive websites for desktop and mobile at a minimum. I don't know if it's worth doing that kind of intermediate for a tablet scenario. Right. To me, that's more like a desktop.
Yeah, I would think so too. But yeah, okay. So now we got a completely I wouldn't consider this a marketing related book. This is a human nature, book. It's not. This isn't. At least when I read it, I didn't feel it's very, very detailed. I mean, this goes through everything. You have a chapter on sleep, and how important sleep is to the primal. I mean, you really get really deep in the whole from A to Z of the brain.
Yeah. So it's this latest book is really kind of coming full circle. Remember, I told you I was interested in cognition and artificial intelligence, and that was my grad school study at UC San Diego. So I've come full circle. I was interested in persuasion and cognition and cognitive science. Then I applied that to marketing, and like I said, pretty successfully. Now I've come full circle. And what I found, the reason I wrote the book was, I think we're like bringing, as consumers or individuals, a knife to the proverbial gunfight, right? These big companies like Google and Facebook are just manipulating the crap out of us, dividing us, sucking money out of our pockets, fracturing our politics. I could go on, right? And we don't even know what they're doing to us. And so this was my attempt to level the playing field, to say, hey, if this is what the operating system that all 8 billion people on the planet share. I don't care about your personal story, about whether you're an introvert or extrovert or anything that is particular to you. I'm saying these are general tendencies from the earliest life on earth to who we are. And if you want to understand the human brain, you have to retrace that whole evolutionary arc.
And you do that. And this is exactly what you do in the book. You retrace it all.
Yeah, so there's some things we share with fruit flies, like people talk about dopamine, for example. Well, we share it with insects. There's nothing uniquely human about that.
Yeah.
But there's some things that are bizarrely and uniquely human, like our need to spread culture, storytelling. All that's in the book as well.
So you just said something. Part of the reason why you wrote the book was to level the playing field. And you talk about some of these, big companies, what they're doing. What is it that you think they are doing that we don't? That is making the playing field uneven?
Well, they're taking advantage of the algorithmic stuff, the very AI, artificial intelligence, that I was working on in order to cull these really, really subtle patterns out of data. And the thing is, if you have enough data, it's a black box. You don't know what's going on inside of it. You can't open it up and say, well, there's a rule that said, if you live in San Diego and you're a bald man, and then do this. It's not that kind of obvious inspection. It's these very, very subtle patterns. So we can't explain what these black box systems are doing. And in a way, though, it's kind of dangerous, because what we train them on, the data sets that we use to train them on, have a bunch of built-in biases. So, for example, I gave you mortgage lending data from the 1970s. You'd essentially recreate redlining, where minority neighborhoods aren't allowed to get mortgage loans. And that was just because the biased decisions of the loan officers at the time. So what garbage in, as we say, garbage out. That's an old computer term, right? Yeah. So if you feed it data that's biased, and then it's going to pick up on it, and you add to that the profit motive, because really Facebook isn't there to help the world. Facebook is there to make money for Zuckerberg. So you add that on top of it, and all of a sudden we're just being mined for really kind of unethical reasons, and in subtle ways, and with algorithm updates, and we don't know what's going on. So if we say, okay, this is our brain, this is how it works, these are our evolutionary biases, at least I can try to take that into a little better account. That's my goal.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, there was that recent movie or documentary, right? Social Dilemma. Did you see that?
Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So that digs into that, trying to get more screen time and showing somebody continually affirming whatever it is that they already want to see, so that they continue to view it.
And the social good of that is completely unclear. I mean, I can personally testify, having 2 teenagers in the house. One of the things they talk about in that documentary, which is great, by the way, is like the fact that teens that are on cell phones, that kind of instant on, always comparing yourself to the ideal version of someone on social media, they have much higher rates of depression and suicide. I mean, at 11, 12, and 13, you have much higher suicide rates all of a sudden. And I lay that directly at the door of social media. Yeah.
Well, so you talk about in the book, the social thinking, in the book, and tribalism and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose this is just what feeds it, right? So tell me about what's happening in our brain, in our primal brain and conscious brain, that's feeding this need to be in a group. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have actually a whole section of the book with several chapters called Hypersocial.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is they're more collaborative animals. I guess you'd say army ants and in their millions, or rooking penguins in the Antarctic gathering by the tens of thousands. But they're doing kind of the same thing. They're just essentially clones of each other and mimicking behavior. We're the only species on the planet that can cooperate in the billions with unique roles in very complicated activities, right? So the way that we do that is because we're hyper social and we evolve to be cooperative. And that's our big advantage. So we're not designed to be individuals. We're designed to make our tribe more effective. Yeah. And in order to make the tribe more effective, you find these things like we have to spread the ideas of the tribe without questioning them. Again, our modern politics has some perfect examples of that.
Yeah.
So it's not about being right or wrong. It's like if I say to you, Michael, the world's flat. And you climb up on the mast of the ship and you say, well, no, actually, I can kind of see a curve in the horizon. I think it's a ball and we're living on a giant ball. You know what we do to you? We throw you off that freaking mast. I mean, because you're not going with the flow. You're not agreeing with everyone. You're gumming up the works and making it slowing down the spread of our cultural knowledge. So we want tribal cohesion. We want people to mindlessly agree with us, and especially under fear or pressure or uncertainty, we're much more likely to adopt other people's viewpoints than even what direct experience and our own eyes tell us. So that's not some, for an evolutionary perspective, that's not a bug, it's a feature. It's to make stronger tribes. The problem is the effect of tribes at scale like this in our modern civilization and the fact that we're destroying the whole world in the process.
Yeah, it seems so clear these days, at least ever more so than maybe ever before that. And maybe that's an overstatement, but that these groups just continue to find themselves, stay and move, create bigger groups and move further away from the other groups. And obviously, I mean, you look at it even from, I live in San Diego and so-and-so lives in San Francisco, Northern California people versus Southern California people, or 49er fans versus something else, like all these little types of things,
so our need to be tribal is again critical, and we automatically fall into tribes at the smallest incentives. So I remember I was in Australia one time and I went to my first Aussie rules football game.
Yeah. And
my friend who brought me, she and her relatives for 3 generations back, or I think, Carlton fans. Okay, well, so I bought a little, what do you call it? Like,
the scarf thing?
Scarf, yeah.
I know what they call them.
All of a sudden, I was a Carlton fan, and I were rooting against the other team, like the Brisbane Lions, I think was, and it's like, so I formed into a tribe over nothing, and we do that. But see,
well, you did it because to be accepted. You did it to be accepted with your friends, right? That were there, right?
Yeah. Well, but what I'm saying is like it's okay when the tribe was 3 or 4 dozen of your related, kin.
Yeah.
Because you want that the genes want you to survive and to pass the genes on. So if everyone's around and you're wandering on the Eastern Africa 200,000 years ago, that's perfectly fine to have a close-knit tribe. It's not okay when all of a sudden there's billions of people in your tribe. And so humans are unique because it's not literally just the herd we're born into, but we have kind of these overlapping tribal identities. So you're, again, the shave your head bald tribe. I'm a member too.
We connected on that. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I'm in the Mercedes driving tribe. Okay. Yeah. Or I'm in the Southern California tribe, like you say, as opposed to the Northern California tribe. Yeah. So we have kind of different tribal identities that are activated by the surrounding circumstances. So, but our strongest allegiance is usually at the level of values, often religion, because you can, kind of brainwash people literally as soon as they're born. And so those tend to be like the strongest tribal affiliations. And, they don't need to tell you religion, organized religion. There have been wars going on ever since it started and people killing each other in the name of it. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. And it also makes me think about, there was and you probably heard of the book. I think it was, Culting of a Brand, or brand culting of a brand. Anyway, it talked about how brands sort of become their own cult too, right? From the marketing.
Yeah.
You have people that only buy Ford or then
Right.
Chevy. It's Ford
Well,
versus Chevy, or Apple versus Microsoft, you know?
yeah, or Apple versus Samsung. You can
Yeah.
have your Apple phone. I'd rather have a good one that I can get work done on. Okay, that's why I have the Galaxy S20 Plus. But but you can't convince somebody in the Apple tribe that their phone's inferior or actually has features that have been taken out, and that makes it better somehow. Okay, whatever. Keep drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. So what do you think from when you after reading, writing this book, how do you think individuals, at least just for this question from business perspective, can utilize this and apply it to maybe their own organization, their own operations, or their marketing efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you said something earlier I want to just circle back on,
Yeah.
which is that this is not an applied book. This is basically the
Right.
owner's manual, how to be human 101.
Yes.
Addiction, language, memory, creativity, sleep,
Sex.
culture,
Yep.
brain chemistry, our evolution, all of that stuff, right? But you can apply it to pretty much anything in your life. You can certainly apply it to business, marketing, sales, persuasion, leadership, corporate culture, all that. You can also apply it to personal relationships, gender differences, getting along, our social natures, conformity, all of that, right? Or you can apply it to personal development. How do I be more creative? How do I be, live a meaningful, happier life? Obviously, evolution has some predispositions in that direction. So really, since it's not applied, but if you read it 3 times with those 3 different hats on, you totally get a lot out of it. And I designed it to be eminently readable. There's an audiobook version of it as well that I narrated. No footnotes, none of that same old, this Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist did a study with his MIT MBA class, and this is what he found. It's none of that garbage. It's a really easy read, I think, although it's packed, like you say, with good info.
Oh, it's great. Just highly detailed. But I kind of think of it like, one of those things where knowledge is power, right? So just reading this and understanding, having a cognizant idea what is happening can lead you to other conversations, right? It's like going to a therapist, right? The therapist is really there just to get stuff out of you, right?
Right, to hold up the
understand.
mirror. That's how I describe it.
Yeah.
They're just holding up the mirror.
Yeah, and I kind of, when I was going through the book, and I've got it marked up, and I've got different things I've got marked to go back and read, but that's what I was thinking when I was reading. I was like, okay, this is a really good baseline for understanding why we do things and how, and then take that and apply it. I sort of put you on the spot because I was just kind of curious, because you come from the marketing world, obviously.
Yeah.
And so when you think of, the primal brain and these things that are innate in us,
yeah,
how can we as
well, I mean, you didn't put me on the spot. I'm glad to answer. I'll give you some examples. One key thing is that we're really designed for spreading stories and ideas, right? But the thing is, a story will land differently depending on the circumstances. And who's on the receiving end and what their culture and mental model of the world is like. So I'll give you a perfect example. Let me tell you an objective story that I used in the book, okay? So the matador's in the arena, the bull charges, he sidesteps a few inches and plunges his sword between its shoulder blades from above, striking its heart and killing it instantly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's objective. I can record that with a video camera. Now, if you're in Spain and you love bullfighting, this is about man versus raw nature, about being an impeccable warrior, about tradition, about all these other things, right? If you're from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, you think this is wanton animal torture and murder, and it's being subsidized by these Neanderthals that are paying to watch it, right? And it should be stopped immediately.
Yeah.
Same objective story,
Yeah.
but completely different impact of it based on what our cultural values are. And so this is something that I think most marketers get completely wrong, especially in lead gen. And again, I'm going to be keynoting at your show.
Yeah.
I've spoken at affiliate conferences and other lead gen events. And the thing is, it's like, let's just drive more leads. So we just need to put this in front of more people. That's really the goal, right? Mm-hmm. And that's completely backwards. The way to be a good marketer is to say, who's my target audience? Laser focus on that. Then say, I want to understand how they think and what's important to them. What are their values? And only then am I going to pitch them with the right messaging, positioning, and products. But we're kind of like, here's a product, and let's use the megaphone to get it out to as wide an audience as possible. The problem is it's not going to land for anybody, because it's going to, for a wide audience, it has to be a generic story, and generic stories are not compelling at all.
This is where it gets really, really complicated, because while you're talking about this, I'm thinking about just generally all the different individual groups out there, however you want to classify them, whether it's by location or sex or what they like or what they eat, all these sorts of things.
Yeah, demographics or psychographics. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's thousands of these, millions probably, of little things that you can target on different people. And to be able to speak to them specifically in a way that's going to be meaningful to them is really complicated. And so now you see commercials that are very generalized, right? They have different they have mixed race family, they have this, or they're doing, they're trying to reach.
I call it the United Colors of Benetton, that ad campaign that let's have the rainbow of all the world's diverse people.
Yeah, and they try to touch everybody, and I think that's where this probably gets all really, really difficult. And I'm sure there's experts out there that are finding tools and AI and different things that can really hone in on targeting messages for each individual so that you can connect with them in a meaningful way. But it sounds really hard.
Yeah, and by the way, when I say we talk in online marketing a lot about like one-to-one personalization. I mean, that's a distant dream unless we had a couple of clients that did that effectively under some circumstances, but really you need such huge amounts of data and third-party data sets behind it to target them, like you say.
Yeah.
But what about basics like first-time visitor to your landing page, return visitor? It's like if somebody's coming back, you already know the history of what they did on their last visit. So to have amnesia and say, welcome back, and then they come back again, you say, welcome back. Or it's like, welcome, this is the first time we're seeing you. Welcome, it's like some kind of robot stuck on a repeat loop. So it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it more complicated than it needs to be, right? I'm thinking of like crazy stuff, and the simple things are right in front of you to, that you can do.
Yeah. I mean, like, so again, just personalizing it for return visitor versus new visitor. Can you do that? Yeah, pretty simple. Drop a cookie.
Yeah. Tell me about, I mentioned it earlier, but you have a whole, chapter on sleep, and how that affects us as individuals and humans. Tell me a little bit about why did you put a, chapter in your book around sleep?
Wow. Well, when you think about it, there's no form of life that lives longer than a few days on this planet that doesn't have some form of sleep. So it's not optional. You can't just stay up and look at your phone and, see if you got any new emails just before you drop off, and 5 hours of sleep. And for human beings, like most great apes, our closest cousins, they sleep about 10, 12 hours a day. Human beings sleep about 8. So we have much more compressed sleep, because when we came out of the trees, literally the ground in Eastern Africa was much more dangerous. So we had to compress our sleep and have people that would be on night watch to make sure that lions didn't kill us, right? Yeah. So we have a more complicated brain, a much more social brain, and there's extra demands on sleep, and yet we have shorter sleep. So if you shortchange yourself on sleep, you're literally killing yourself. And most people don't realize the effects of that. A couple of nights of short sleep, like 2 6-hour nights in a row, is the same as missing a full night of sleep.
Wow.
Because the most important kind of healing we have is REM sleep, and REM is tail weighted in the night. So that last 90-minute cycle of REM sleep is where you get about half of your REM for the night. So if you're thinking, I'll just cheat an hour, you're really cheating yourself of all that creativity, of recalibrating your social reactions, of being able to learn physical or mental skills and rehearsal from the day before. You lose all of those benefits if you don't sleep on it.
Yeah, that's powerful, and it's something that we don't generally think about,
Yeah, people say, well, diet and exercise, and they kind of throw in sleep as a third. It's absolutely backwards. Sleep, and then everything else layers on top of it. You go insane, and your brain starts breaking down after 16 hours of no sleep.
Yeah, well, there's also people out there that think that they always need to be working, right? Mm-hmm. And they stay up late and they do all this sort of. They wake up early and they get to the gym, and it's actually counterproductive.
Oh my God! The latest thing, and you've probably heard this too. There's like these. I'm in a part of the 4 a.m. club. I mean, these idiots are getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep on a regular basis and are
Yeah.
proud of it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Another thing, I'm curious to get your sort of opinion and thoughts about how humans are sort of reacting to this lockdown. We are social individuals, going out, going to events, going to restaurants, being a part of the masses. Now we for a year now, especially here in California or other states that took responsible and put people sort of in lockdown. I mean, there's got to be some type of effects. And when you think about the primal brain, how do you envision people rebounding from this, or what the effects are?
Great question. I think we're as I mentioned, we're hypersocial, and attachment and connection to other human beings is our most basic need. They've done these longitudinal studies of people, and what they found is that the health outcomes of not having a strong social network is the same as being a 2-pack a day smoker.
From a health perspective.
Yep. Your lifetime. Yep. All your health outcomes. So if you don't have strong social groups and social support, it's deadly. And, some of the worst things that you can do to a human being is to isolate them. So we're going to look back on this age and prisons in general, but Supermax in particular, where you get out of your cage 1 hour a day. And we're going to think this was insane and inhumane. Of course, these people are violent in prison. You're literally driving them insane through isolation. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. It's really inhumane. So we need to have that social connection and touch. Certain chemicals like oxytocin are only released after 15, 20 seconds of touching. So hug people. If you're in your bubble right now, whoever you got, like if your kids will let you hug them, again, mine are teenagers, hug them and hold it, hold hands, all of that stuff. Really important. And you can see what's going on. I mean, there's higher domestic violence, there's mental illness, there's depression. I mean, this is like long-term damage that we're doing. So I think it's unavoidable, but it goes against our very basic nature of being social creatures.
Do you think it's there's like a number? Because I think of individuals that are I don't know, living up in the woods somewhere by themselves or with their mate or whatever, their partner, and they're fine with that. And then there's people that need to have a big family, all this sorts of things. Do you think is that just personality probably driven?
Well, I guess you could say there's a wide range of both genetic and cultural behaviors that are acceptable, right? And so I guess you could say introverted people have been waiting for this their whole life, and that's kind of a joke. You've seen,
I love it.
But it's true up to an extent. They don't feel the pressure to be extreme extroverts anymore, but even introverts need strong social support. So I think that you still have to think about it in terms of like minimums aren't being met right now.
Do you think that this is going to have longer term effects negatively on us as
it depends. I think on for kids, especially since their brains are developing. Our brains don't really start to stabilize till our mid-20s in terms of their development, and so depending on how old your kids are, that's going to have an effect. For teenagers, for example, they don't care about what your parents think; they care about what their peers think. And all of their socialization and what they're learning about the world is happening through their peers. So to be denied the ability to interact with your peers, I think for teenagers, it's really extra hard right now. Little kids, they're still dependent on their parents, and, they're in the house with their parents. Maybe a little too much togetherness for the parents, but I don't think there's damage on the little kids. Whereas for the teenagers, I think there's real damage because this is happening during those formative years.
Yeah, it's so sad. I mean, I think of, the follow-up question is, do you think there's going to be a big rebound too? Like we're being coiled up, right?
Yes.
And it's boom, we're going to be let out of a cage, so to speak. And, do you expect that sort of happen as well?
I do. I think, sporting events, music events, travel, business conferences, people have predicted, like lead generation world, no one's going to go to in-person because we're so used to doing virtual events. Bull, because in-person events, you can't beat them for networks, for creativity, for that physical, social interaction, all of that stuff. And I think, there's going to be, like you say, pent up demand, and it's going to come roaring back is my prediction.
Yeah, and I think of the arts too, right? Just music and like music or
music
arts.
and
People are
sports,
at home. All that being, those creatives right now are likely at home creating these things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when all those things can be released out and seen in, like, whether it's art or whether it's music or whatever it is, or like movies. All these things have been suppressed, right? All the creativity things have been suppressed because
and even things like watching, I like Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. Well, they can't film the episodes, right? So now all of that, we're waiting an extra year just for them to kick back into production and make the next season of our favorite shows. Yeah, that's all on hold largely too.
Yeah. So speaking of, you're going to be keynoting Lead Generation World in March. So that's next month. Pretty excited about that, and I hope you are too. I'm really glad to have you a part of it. What are you going to be talking about? Obviously, we're going to be talking about the book, but maybe just give us a little sneak preview.
The keynote's not about the book. The keynote's about neuromarketing. It'll be very, very much directly applicable to everyone in the audience, and I'll explain basically how the brain works at a very basic level, and then we're going to have a series of strategies of how you can apply this. I guess you'd say unconscious biases or irrational biases and take advantage of them as a marketer. So I'll give you some strategies and some examples and case studies of what we've done for our clients when I used to run my agency. And it'll be a pretty powerful way for you to improve your lead generation by tapping into neuromarketing.
Yeah. I'm excited for it. I love that stuff. I just, I certainly don't know enough about it, but I love hearing it because it really, we get to a different level of why you do the things, why we're putting things on the web, why we're saying things on this, on the website, how we say it. And it provides a little bit more transparency, beyond just, hey, we need to have a green button, or we need to have 2 options versus 4 options or 3, those sorts of things,
Yeah. So I'm going to try to give people the why behind it. And so I think that if you're going to be an effective marketer, you should invest in the durable evergreen stuff, which is, again, how do brains work? How do you persuade people in general? The tactics of what channels you're using or technologies you're using, that gets layered on top. But to me, that's more like, paint by numbers. But to create the actual structure of it, that has to be based on durable principles. So if you want to have a good career, long career as a marketer, understand what you're trying to persuade, which is the brain.
Yeah. It's totally separate question. I really jumping around here, but I'm curious, your core, background again was, with data science and all this. What do you see like in today's world that gets you like, you're really like, wow, that's really cool stuff, from that perspective? Are there cool things that you're like tripping out on when you hear about it? And
well, I mean, to me, I'm actually doubling down on the brain stuff.
Okay.
There's a golden age right now happening. I mean, we explored the wider universe. I have a friend, for example, who's in charge of the camera on the Mars mission. That's about to land, on Mars. Cool. And that's really cool stuff. But the outer universe, or the depths of the ocean even, aren't, to me, as interesting as the human brain. And we're finding out a lot through behavioral economics, medical imaging, social psychology, all of this stuff. And we're kind of like cracking the skull open and saying, like, what are human beings really about? And there's so much really cool stuff happening in understanding the brain and persuasion right now. So I for me, again, the book was almost like came out of this moment. It came out of the fact that we need to explain this in a non-scientific, non-jargony way. And I believe my book is the first one that does that. It's broad and deep, but it's accessible.
Yeah. The brain is quite crazy, right? I mean, the fact, we've always known that we only use a small portion of it is what we've always been told, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't know how I came across, but I came across an article the other day, and I wish I had a better memory, but it was about, it was a recent study about, and they gave, individuals, was it some drug? I don't, some psychedelic, drug. I don't know, DMT or what or LSD or whatever the heck it was. I don't remember. and then they mapped it. You know, they were however they do it, but they were showing like these things opened, you know, the door to some other brain functions that weren't normally mapped for different feelings and all that sort of stuff. Because I think, you know, you talk about this too, is, you know, the neurons, they're mapped in certain ways to produce.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I do in the book is I actually do a lot of myth busting. Okay. So one myth is that we're rational and that the rational part of our brain is in charge. And that's what we should aspire to be, Mr. Spock. And I say, kill Mr. Spock, because the real driver is the primal brain underneath. It's actually the one making the decisions for you 95% of the time. Another thing is that left brain, right brain, you know, we've heard about that creative, logical. That's total bullshit too. And then the final one is this: we only use a small portion of our brain, and that's completely backwards. Have you seen that science fiction movie where the you know, basically somebody got to use more and more of their brain till they got the like 100%, they became a god, basically.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah. You know, that's total bull too. Not unfortunately, but the brain uses a lot of energy. The human brain in particular uses a quarter of our resting calories just to power the brain. It's this huge energy sink. So he basically keeps most parts of itself on standby when they're not needed. So it conserves energy. Our brain's an ignoring machine, a forgetting machine, and it's designed to conserve energy. So when certain things are happening, different subsystems in the brain light up and maybe connect differently, like you say with drugs, but you're never using your whole brain. That's another myth I try to bust.
Well, you're not using it, you're saying. Or
not all at once. I mean, like for your whole brain to be firing, you're using a bunch of energy, and it's like, better be doing something really important to use up that much energy.
Yeah, and you obviously this whole book on the primal brain and what where your decisions are coming from and why. Tell me a little bit about that before I let you go, about the different layers. You have the conscious and unconscious, right? And how decisions are being made are sometimes they're from thousands of years of evolution.
Yeah, so a lot of the things aren't even decisions. They're automatic reflexes. You burn your hand on a hot stove, you'll pull it away. You're not going to go, what's that strange smell coming from the tip of my finger, you know, as it burns. You're just going to pull it away. And next time, if you're dumb enough to touch the hot stove again, you'll do the same thing. That's a reflex. That's an automatic response that works 95% of the time, and that's close enough, okay? Then there's learned responses. So as mammals, we layered on this basically aversion affinity thing. Like if something's good, we'll go towards it. If something's bad, we'll try to avoid it. You know, so pleasure and pain are a pull. But in order to remember whether it's good or bad, you need to have memories. And so we're learning from our own life experience, our direct individual life experience, but we need to remember things that were good or bad. And that's why if you want to form really strong emotions or affect people's decision-making, you have to get emotions involved really strongly. The logical emotions don't exist, literally. You can't make a decision on a logical basis, okay? And then we have kind of the newest part of the brain, the neocortex, and that part's there largely for social reasoning. It's to figure out, okay, if I really do a crappy job for Michael at this keynote, then he's not going to recommend me to his friend who runs this other conference, and you know, stuff like that. It's to figure out the social alliances. So most of our kind of rational brain is there to model our place in the group to get the most social benefits with the fewest social drawbacks. And then there's some tiny weird percentage of people that do 2 + 2 is 4 and create microwave ovens and send spaceships to the moon. But most of us are spreading social knowledge with our brains.
So interesting. Okay, so where can people buy the book? Just primalbrain.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Just go to primalbrain.com. And I mentioned I narrated the audiobook. There's an ebook, and the print book will be out April 6th worldwide, but you can pre-release copies on the website, autographed copies right now if you want.
Yeah, definitely recommend anybody to get it. And then for more information on what you got going on, you got timash.com, right?
Yeah, that's right. So if somebody's interested in keynote speaking or corporate marketing training, or I think this is applicable to your lead generation universe, I do really brutal website reviews I 100% guarantee them. So if you don't like what I say, I'll give you all your money back. But that's usually a great way to improve your lead generation.
Yeah, I love that. You used to do that, at the other conferences. You go up there and I think you have, right? You used to do that.
Yeah, the rapid fire. Your baby is ugly.
That was so good, man.
Yeah, those are fun.
And that's really powerful because one, it's you're doing it in real time and you're showing, talking about it. And so many other people get to learn because, listen, everybody's website virtually is the same. We're all doing the same dumb things, the wrong things, or whatever for the most part. But so seeing, the example of you getting up there and tearing the, sites apart and giving good advice, it's not just about knocking it down.
It's not with the best bedside manner, but if you want some feedback, you'll definitely get it from me. Actually, we should do that. We should probably do some kind of online webinar or something where we do these rapid fire reviews. I think that'd be fun. Yeah,
it'd be fun to do those again because that's been, at least I haven't, I think that when I saw you were at LeadsCon and it must have been, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe.
Sounds about right. Yeah, I've keynoted it 3 times, but it was about that time frame. Yeah.
I have to. Time these days is so hard to to determine how long ago things were, what today is.
You said it, brother. I always joke that 2020 was a long decade.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I won't make this interview any longer for you, and we'll wrap it up here. But if people are interested, make sure to go to timash.com and then also the primalbrain.com too for the book, and definitely recommend getting the book. I thank you for hopping on here and just talking and chatting about everything. We could probably do it for another hour, but I know you got other things going on. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you joining the podcast, and I appreciate you being willing to speak at Lead Gen World as well.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure, Michael, and can't wait to see everybody in Orlando in March.
Awesome. All right, Tim. Thanks a lot.